welcome to Sound Bites of Life. I'm Michael DeMay with Human Life of Washington, and joining me today is Perry Underwood of SRT Services. And we're going to be talking today about what's a really important new way of thinking about how best to be helping people through a lot of different things related to abortion and to sexual trauma that comes in relation to that, and just to help kind of optimize how pregnancy resource centers and other organizations that are helping young women and young men to make the healthiest decisions in their lives. So Perry, thank you very much for joining us.
Glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me, Michael.
Well, why don't we start with kind of the basics. How did you get involved in this work?
Well, about 11 years ago, I moved from Alaska to the Spokane, Washington area to kind of semi-retire. But I was doing some marketing consulting work. I've been in the corporate world for 30 years, and I was doing some marketing consulting work, and I was dealing with a lot of clients about how to market their business. So I ended up writing a book on marketing, and the local pregnancy center got a hold of my book through a mutual friend, and read the book and asked if they could meet with me. So I met with the local pregnancy center, and they actually hired me as a consultant to look at their operations top to bottom. So one of the things that the director at the time told me was there's 2,000 abortions taking place in the Spokane area every year. They were of the opinion that everyone who went through an abortion was adversely impacted by that decision to have an abortion. And they were the only healing program in town, yet they were only seeing 10 to 12 women, no men, a year, and they wanted to know what the problem was. So I'm making a long story short. I was at this for 8 months, but when I in the final analysis, it was clear to me that there was a huge marketing problem. And so I outlined to them what they needed to do to correct everything and to start reaching more people. And I thought the director's jaw was going to hit the floor because it was going to require a total rethinking of how they did business.
Just a small thing.
Yeah. So I did my job. I went home and I was done with that. And I have a great relationship with that center still today. But I just felt the Holy Spirit speaking to me, saying, "Now that you know what you know, what are you going to do about it?" And my reply was, "Well, nothing. It's not my problem." And he says, "Wrong answer. Let's try this again." So from that, Abortion Anonymous was founded in 2013. And so for abortion recovery. Then in 2018, we added sexual abuse and assault recovery. And then just in last year, we added miscarriage recovery. And so we've changed our name from Abortion Anonymous. Our legal name is now Savanon, which is Sexual Abuse Victims Anonymous. But our DBA, what we do business as, is SRT Services, and SRT represents sexually related trauma. We offer programs for sexual abuse and assault, past abortion, and miscarriage recovery. That's how I got involved.
Well, that's quite a story, and there are, of course, a lot of things to unpack there. I want to start in kind of a weird place, which is to talk about the use of the term marketing. Now, I'm a millennial, and my experience in college was that a lot of people, when you would say something like marketing, that was kind of the cue to talk about the need for the proletariat to rise up against the bourgeoisie, or so anything to do with business was kind of that direction. And there's a lot that I disagree with there. But just to kind of focus on the marketing thing, I think that one thing that a lot of people miss is that while certainly marketing is something that corporations of dubious ethics can and do misuse oftentimes,
Mhm.
just in order to rake in the cash and get more people in. Marketing itself is morally neutral. Marketing can be good, marketing can be bad.
Yep.
And, let's say that you make the best chocolate ice cream in town, and you're not even really in it for the money. You get the money to keep the business going, but like, what really makes your day is just for people to come in and get their chocolate ice cream, and the smile on their face is really why you like to do it. The money is just to keep a roof over your head and to be able to maintain the business so that you can keep giving people chocolate ice cream. But if nobody knows you make the best chocolate ice cream in town, nobody's going to come in and get it, and they're going to miss out on your ice cream, and you're not going to be able to provide that service to people. So marketing in its ethical framework, done properly, is to let people know that a good service that they might be interested in exists, either so that they can benefit from it or so that somebody else can benefit from it. And so what would you say, and I'm sure this didn't just apply to that one pregnancy center, but I'm sure this is a pervasive issue throughout a lot of the pro-life ministry. And I know that, we've run into that at Human Life. I know a lot of great pro-life organizations that run into marketing challenges. Could you speak a little bit to some of the issues that that you find with that? Like, why is marketing such an important thing to talk about in being able to offer charitable services to people? Because none of these organizations are charging for their services. These are
Right.
being offered free of charge. So how does marketing come into play with that?
Marketing probably should be defined what marketing is. And
Mm,
marketing is simply communicating a message to an intended audience.
mhm,
Now, if your organization is in the business of providing free pregnancy tests or pregnancy counseling, you have to have money to do that. So you need to communicate what you're doing to donors. That's marketing. You put a sign in front of your building that says what you're doing. That's marketing. So often people equate marketing with advertising.
mhm,
Advertising is a type of marketing, is part of that, but marketing is everything you do. It's your logo, it's your name.
mhm,
One example, I had this conversation with a gal in California this morning where so many organizations that are in abortion recovery, they call themselves ministries,
mhm.
and they are ministries. But when you call yourself a ministry, you're basically telling people who are outside the faith community, you're not wanted.
Or at least that's how it's perceived. Like, that's not what
That
we're
is,
trying to communicate, but that's how
that's
it's
not what they're saying. That's
yeah,
not what they're saying. They would
yeah.
never think that in a million years, but that's how it's perceived.
Mhm,
So marketing is taking a look at everything you do and asking the question, what sort of message are we communicating? Another good example is how many pro-life organizations, they're trying to reach people outside the faith community, but they have a name that identifies them clearly as a religious organization.
mhm.
There's nothing wrong with being a religious organization if that's who your target is. And so your messaging has to be consistent with what your goals are.
Yeah.
So if you only want to reach young women who are going to church and find themselves pregnant, then the Christianese is fine in your messaging, and it is pervasive in Christian nonprofit organizations how their use of marketing Christian symbols and terms and language, all that is communicating a message that we are a message here for Christians.
Mhm.
That's not what they want to communicate. They want to communicate that they're here for everyone, but their marketing, their messaging is not in line with what their heart is.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think another part that plays into that is underlying everything as a Christian, and there are plenty of people in the pro-life movement who are not Christian. We have great friends with, secular pro-life, and there are Jewish communities, there are Muslim communities, there are all kinds of religious and non-religious communities, Christian and non-Christian communities, whatever, in the pro-life movement. It's a vast, complicated group. but a lot of us are Christians. I would say pretty strongly, at least in the United States, the majority is Christian. That's just what it is. And of course, Christians, we have a number of things that we would like to do for other people. We would like to help them with their practical circumstances, but most Christians would say, I also want to share the faith with them. Again, it's for the good of the other person. You know, whether you agree with Christianity or not, that is what an ethical Christian is going to be bringing this at. They're trying to convert people because they're trying to help them, not because they're trying to get something out of it. But there are bad faith actors amongst Christians, a lot of them. And there are also Christians who are well-intentioned, not bad faith actors, but use terrible methodology and use ineffective methodology and use things that even if they're not intended to harm, can be harmful because of the way that they're approaching things. And so because of all of those things, our society, I think, has not all people, but a lot of people have a great antipathy towards Christians because they have had bad experiences with Christians in the past. And so, you know, it's like, well, yeah, I want to help her out in her pregnancy. I also want her to be saved. It's like, that's great. I'm on board with that. But you have to understand that the way that you present that message is going to make or break that possibility for you. If you push too hard, too fast, you don't bring people in, you drive them out. And to the Christians in the audience listening, I would want to say that, you know, Jesus always met people where they were, and he approached them in a language that they understood, and he talked to them about what they needed to hear in that moment. Now, of course, we have to do a lot more guesswork because we're not God. but the same kind of principle applies where it's like you need to understand the walls that people have up, and a lot of the time that's the wise option, is to not club them over the head with it, but to have it's there. It's definitely there. We're not denying anything that we believe, but we're being wise about how we present it to people. And I think that's another thing that a lot of Christians need to understand.
I can put it in another way. I've shared this with many, many pastors and Christian leaders. Let's say your next door neighbor is a Muslim,
Mm-hmm.
a faithful Muslim. He comes to your home one evening and invites you to attend mosque with him.
Mm-hmm.
My question is, would you feel a bit awkward or uncomfortable or even apprehensive about attending a Muslim mosque if you're a devout Christian? Would you have any apprehension at all? And the answer is, of course, you would. Well, the same apprehension as we would feel about attending a Muslim mosque or a Buddhist temple to worship is the same apprehension that people outside the faith community have in walking into your church or into
Yep.
your organization that you have identified as Christian. They have no idea what to expect. And you're leaving it to their imagination to create the scenario. And
Yeah.
so the same apprehension that we would have going into a strange situation, they have the same apprehension. And we have to understand
Mm-hmm.
that and market around that.
Yeah. And some people, it might even be worse because it might not just be apprehension. If they have been wounded by the church or what they think of as the church or by an individual within the church in any way, shape, or form, and a lot of people have been, including a lot of faithful Christians I know, where they didn't leave the church, but they were definitely hurt by people in the church. Guess what? That adds to that apprehension. That's a normal thing. That's a psychologically normal thing. If you receive bad stimuli in X context, then if X context comes up again, you're going to be more apprehensive about it because that was where that negative stimuli occurred. And if it was something that was outright traumatic, absolutely you're going to be nervous about that. That's just your natural human survival instincts, frankly, operating the way they're supposed to. It's trying to say this environment was corresponded with this trauma, ergo, I want to avoid this environment. That makes sense. And we have to be compassionate towards that.
And just the unknown creates that
Yes.
same apprehension.
Yes.
That'd be a bad experience. Doesn't have everything you said is absolutely true, but just the unknown is enough to
Yes.
create the apprehension.
Yeah, I remember a couple times, asking some friends from a different denomination to attend church with me, and it was the same thing. And like they know me, they're good friends with me, and they know that I wouldn't be asking them to do something bad, but it's still an apprehensive thing for them just because it's different and they don't know what to do. And most people are awkward when they're in an unfamiliar situation, especially when they're surrounded by people who are of a different group, and maybe the only person you know there is the person who asked you, if that. And in the case of like a pregnancy resource center, you might not know anybody there. You're just walking in the door. And so that's even more uncomfortable. And again, it's not to say that we can't overcome that and deal with that. It is just to say that that is a hurdle that we need to be aware of.
Exactly.
So that's kind of the general backdrop to like what kind of some of why there's an issue. But so I read your book, and I will probably end up referencing this a number of times. But this kind of is an overview of the marketing model, a case for the SRT marketing model, expanding the reach and effectiveness of PRCs, or pregnancy resource centers, for those who don't know. And I found it fascinating. Like I think that this case that you make makes sense. But I can also see how people would be apprehensive about it because it feels, at least on the surface, like it's a significant departure from the norm. So maybe we can talk next a little bit about kind of what your average PRC, Pregnancy Resource Center, is doing currently, and how the SRT model is. It looks like it's a change. I would argue that it's more of an evolution of something that's already there. I don't think it's a change in core values. I think it's a polishing rather than an alteration. But I can understand how it would look like an alteration to some people. So maybe we can kind of talk about where things are and where you're suggesting they go.
Very good. And I talk about that very thing in the book
Hmm.
because it, and I use the analogy of back in the 80s, almost all car manufacturers shifted their making of their automobiles from a rear wheel drive to a front wheel drive.
Hmm.
And it took the automobile industry 60 years to make that transition. Front wheel is so much more efficient, it's safer, better traction. Hands down, front wheel drive is better than rear wheel drive, unless you're a teenage kid and you like to spin your wheels. but for most people, front wheel drive is much better. And,
Yeah.
and, and I explain that in the book how changing the model does not change how we're driven. It doesn't. Going to front wheel drive didn't change the automobile. It
Hmm.
still has an engine, it has a drivetrain, it has four wheels, steering wheel and seat belts and all that. It did none of that changed. It only changed how it's driven. And the SRT model that I present in that book only changes how pregnancy centers are driven. And it doesn't change anything about their core values. Um, we maintain in our organization that the SRT, sexually related trauma model, is the most powerful abortion prevention tool we have ever seen
Mm.
because it changes the narrative. Um, I was on a Zoom call a couple of days ago with the director of a pregnancy center in Idaho, and she um, she had contacted us because she had read the book and wanted to know more, and she shared with us that a group of women from a local business organization had just come in to tour their facilities.
Mm.
And she knew that this group of women most likely would all be pro-abortion.
Hmm.
And and so as she was walking this group of women, this group of businesswomen through the facility, she started talking. She had just read the book and she said, you know what? We are a sexually related trauma facility. And we deal with miscarriage, we deal with past abortion, we deal with sexual abuse and assault, we deal with unwanted pregnancy, we deal with sexually transmitted diseases. And instead of the conversation with this group of pro-abortion women becoming confrontational, their eyes and their faces lit up. This is according to this director. They lit up,
Hmm.
and it completely changed the narrative. And they were all on board with what she was saying.
Hmm.
And they hadn't even called me or contacted us. All she had done is just read the book and said, "I'm going to give this a try. I'm going to give this a try and see what happens."
Nice.
And she was blown away by the response of these people that she thought would be hostile to her organization when
Wow.
she changed the narrative. And that's what's happening.
Yeah.
If we can change the narrative to, um, and I also talk about this in the book a little bit, where if you get 100 pro-abortion people and ask them to finish the sentence, "Abortion is blank," you're going to get all kinds of positive things that describe abortion from the framework of the mother.
Yeah.
You ask 100 pro-life people to fill in the blank, "Abortion is blank," you're going to get all kinds of responses that abortion is negative and from the perspective of the child.
Hmm.
But one thing I believe we can all agree on, and if we start there, is abortion is traumatic. Abortion
Yeah.
is trauma. And everyone can agree to that. And if we in the pro-life community started including the word trauma when we talked about abortion, it's easier to swallow than the murder message or the condemnation and the guilt and all of the things that we have traditionally done in the pro-life
Hmm.
community. Let's talk about it as a trauma. And then when
Hmm.
some young woman comes in and they understand that you are there to deal with sexually related trauma, including unwanted pregnancy, then that advocate, that counselor can talk to them about, "I understand what you're going through, and I would be misguiding you if I advise you to get an abortion, because an abortion, you're just exchanging a 9-month trauma for a lifelong trauma."
Yep.
And so it changes the narrative. It puts it in perspective of it being a trauma, and it changes the marketing. So anyway, I don't know if that answered your question or not, but that's what we're trying to do is change the narrative, and in doing so, we're reaching more people and preventing more abortion.
Hmm. Yeah. And I do think that it's some people are gonna regard this as maybe being like an either or thing. It's like, oh, we have to stop the services we were already doing or stop the
No.
approach we were already doing so we can switch to this. No, it's a both and. That I think is one of the most persuasive things out there. So like, right now, I've been in kind of an ongoing several month long email exchange with a chap about abortion, and this I reached out to me, said, hey, I know that you're pro-life. I don't really remember exactly how the conversation started, like what prompted him on this. He was just like, hey, so you're pro-life, I'm pro-choice. Let's talk about that. And I love it when that happens because it's like here's somebody who is acting in good faith and wants to understand the other side. And there are plenty of things that he and I disagree on, but we do agree that people matter, and we do agree that we should try to act with justice, and we do agree that we should try to help society be a better place and protect the innocent and so on. And so whenever I'm talking with him about this, I'm always approaching this from a variety of different levels, and I'm making these principled arguments with him. But at the same time, I'm also bringing up, abortion really isn't helping women either. Like, even like, I think that just saying the fetus is a person with an equal right to life, I think that's a sufficient argument against abortion in itself. But here's another sufficient argument, which is that look at the trauma that abortion causes. There's all these physical trauma that is caused in a lot of cases. And the more and more research we do on that, the more and more we find out about abortion being tied to long-term injuries, into serious hemorrhaging problems, future infertility, even cancer, and a variety of things that go along with that. But there's also the psychological trauma of it, as you say. It is an incredibly high percentage. And if there's already an existing sexual trauma like sexual assault, which is tied to this, abortion very frequently causes that to just skyrocket and turn what was already a horrific trauma, a, just a truly awful situation by itself, and then doubled down on that with the second trauma. And and that's horrific. Like that's not the ethical way to treat the woman. She deserves better care than that. And so I've found that by approaching it from kind of both metrics and showing that, standing up for the rights of one group of people doesn't mean we have to take rights away from somebody else. If you stand up for the rights of all people, you actually help everyone. And that has been much more effective in chatting with this guy than if I had just taken one approach or the other. Either one of them can be persuasive, but together they're very persuasive. And I think that's really what I picked up on in this book is it's not getting rid of the things that are already working, it's expanding it and contextualizing it would maybe be a better way of framing it with something that's going to make it even more effective than it already is, and is also, as you say, going to really help us reclaim the narrative, because a lot of people will accuse us of saying, oh, you don't care about people after they're born. Well, you can't say that with a straight face when we have an organization that's also helping women deal with sexual trauma of other varieties, whether that be miscarriage or sexual assault or any of these. The full list here being abuse and sexual assault, miscarriage, STDs, unwanted pregnancy, and past abortions. That's not an insubstantial number of services to be covering. And whatever else people might feel about abortion, everyone in society can agree that those are traumas that we should really be addressing more than they are being addressed in our society.
You talked about changing what goes on in pregnancy centers, and once they embrace this model, it doesn't have to change anything. But what it does change some things, because I've talked with dozens, if not hundreds, of leaders of pregnancy centers around the world. And when we get down to a real heart-to-heart, honest conversation, without exception, they tell me how truly disappointed they are in the few abortion-minded women that they're actually seeing. So what's happened, the crisis pregnancy movement that started in the 80s, 70s, but mainly in the 80s, it was there to help women in crisis pregnancies. And because we were not seeing the numbers we were hoping to see, and the abortions were just continuing, they've evolved to pregnancy resource centers where they're handing out diapers and strollers and free clothes, and they've got shopping, and they have all these services for pregnant women. And they keep adding more services, but it's not changing the number of abortion-minded women that they were hoping to see. And that's what this does. This changes everything, in that they'll start seeing, once they make this transition, to seeing more abortion-minded men and women. And as they see more and more abortion-minded men and women, and they get back to the true purpose and the true mission that they start off with, then they start dropping some of the other things that they find are not a great use of their resources. So many pregnancy centers have evolved into a social service, a place for people who don't have money to come and get free stuff. That's what has happened. And that's not everybody, that's not all cases, but a vast majority of pregnancy resource centers have evolved to becoming a social service where you come in to get free stuff. And when you come in to get the free stuff, we got a shot at you, talk to you about keeping the baby or whatever the issue might be at the time. Yeah. So as they make this evolution, a lot of these services that they're doing that that really aren't productive, aren't their activity without accomplishment, they can start looking and say, we don't need that anymore, because we're reaching the people that we intended to reach. Not that those things are bad at all, but it's not really what the mission was originally.
Yeah. And I think that's a critical distinction there, is that, it is good to be having these diaper drives. That's great. Like, diapers are crazy expensive. I've got all kinds of nieces and nephews. I got this uncle mug here. Like, diapers are expensive. There have been times where it's like, hey, can you I know you're gonna come visit. Can you pick up a thing of diapers? Yeah, sure. It's like $30. What? I mean, I guess it's good that everybody's wearing masks because this is robbery. Like, how how is it this bad to get these things? So it's those are useful services, but a lot of those things, some of the pregnancy resource centers, even after switching to the SRT model, they're still going to be able to maintain these things. Some that aren't, that are going to decide that, okay, dealing with the initial, we're trying to get her out of that initial bad situation. But then after that, maybe we're not doing the diaper part in-house, but we're networked with the other charitable organizations in town that are doing that. That's a great place for like the church or the larger church ministries, or if there's kind of an interconnected group of church ministries, that's where you say, okay, we're initially dealing with the trauma, and now that we're helping you with that, hey, what else is going to be helpful to you? Oh, you need some help dealing with some housing. Well, good, we're networked with this housing group over here. Oh, you need some help with supplies. You need, the diaper, the stroller. You need to be able to go back to school or get some financial help or some financial literacy training so that you can help yourself, solving the problem long term by breaking the cycle. Great. We're networked with all of those groups. We've got these other resources to help you. And some of them we might even be offering in-house, but we're dealing with the trauma first, because that's really the underlying issue. And as you say, that's getting back to the core values, because it is good to be helping provide these free services to people. But if the whole reason your organization started was to help women dealing with unwanted pregnancies and help the child in that unwanted pregnancy, then you need to be drawing those people in and being able to also be providing this help for people dealing with other forms of sexual trauma. That also is a tremendous charitable thing to do. It's a compassionate mission to be helping people in these situations, and frankly, it's also going to save more unborn lives, because a lot of times trauma builds, and you will have this situation where a past trauma with a previous abortion will often lead to a repeat abortion because of the unresolved trauma from the first one, or something else along those lines. So it is both compassionate and practical, and neither of these things are in conflict with each other.
When we started our Savanon, which is the sexual abuse and assault piece of our organization, when we started that, I had many conversations and heard stories of women who were telling their abortion story, and as they were telling their story, there was a sexual abuse or sexual assault component in their story. And I would think, man, that's sad. That is so sad. And one day it was like, duh, there is an incredibly strong connection between sexual abuse and assault and abortion. And we are compiling data, doing surveys, putting stuff together. I don't have the raw data to back this up, but my belief is when it's all said and done, we will have concrete information that would support that when women are sexually abused as children and as young women, that might not lead to pregnancy, but often it does lead to pregnancy, which leads to abortion. But even when it doesn't, sexual abuse creates a pattern in that young girl's life, and men too, but talk about women here. It creates a pattern where she is no longer in control of her body. Somebody is telling her what to do with it. And when they start off at a young age, when other people are in control of what's going on with their body, then when they do find themselves pregnant, they're much more inclined to have somebody else controlling what's going to happen with their body at that point. A pattern starts at an early age with sexual abuse that carries on and makes them much more vulnerable to being pressured and manipulated when a situation arises that where they feel pregnant, abortion is an option.
Yeah, and And what strikes me about that is that even putting aside the abortion component to this, having a ministry to help people deal with sexual assault trauma, that's just a huge part of helping women reclaim agency over their bodies. And that's a laudable goal. Like that is because we have a real problem in our society. It's something that I'm grateful that people are talking about it more than they used to. And I'm also grateful that it, as horrific as it is that this has happened, the fact that so many people are talking about it gives an avenue for actually building some bridges. Because, the guy I referenced earlier, I'm in this email conversation with, one of the early things that we ended up talking about, and one of the things that, we both feel very strongly about is, the fact that sexual assault trauma is not being addressed the way that it needs to be in society, and that we definitely need to be doing a better job about that. And despite the many disagreements that we have about other things, we're wholeheartedly in agreement about that. And that enables us to recognize that it's like, okay, we're both compassionate people. We both care about other people, and we both care about people in vulnerable situations. We want to help them. And if you can recognize that somebody on the other side of the aisle from you is that way about one thing, it becomes that much easier to have a conversation about them, about other areas where you might disagree, but at least where you can look at it and say, I don't think your approach is right. I think your approach even is making things worse, but I recognize that you're trying to do the right thing. And it makes it easier for us to have a conversation about what is really going to be the better solution here so we can work towards the truth together. And it's an example of, you know, a way that even in the wake of this tragedy, we can still find ways to bring healing out of this so that hopefully we can help other people either avoid a similar tragedy, or if they have already experienced that, to better find healing, because there'll be more consensus in our society about the way to approach that. And so, like your example of the businesswomen who toured that pregnancy center, that could have turned into a place of wasting energy with both sides butting heads, but instead it became, oh, wow, that's great that you're doing all of those things. And maybe even the potential for, how can we help? Because even though we disagree with some of this, we at least like that you're doing X. So why don't we help you with X? Because that's something where we can be united in our efforts. And that's, everybody benefits from that.
You bring up a good point about the awareness that has been growing in our culture around sexual abuse and assault in the last few years. The Me Too movement that came out, it's kind of lost some steam. And
Mm-hmm.
the reason it lost some steam, people were coming out telling about their stories, but there was no then what.
Mm-hmm.
I've told my story, I've exposed myself, now what?
Yeah.
It's like there's, standing in the middle of the street with nowhere to go. It's just they've been encouraged to share their story, but there's not a next step. And that's
Yeah.
what we provide is the
Yeah.
next step. We are the then what.
Yeah.
And I believe churches don't talk about sexual related trauma, miscarriage, sexual abuse, past abortion,
Mm-hmm.
pregnancy. They don't talk about it because they know if they do, they open this can of worms, and they don't know what to do with the worms once the can is open. And
Yep.
so that's where we come along and partner with pregnancy centers that now become trauma centers, and they become the then what. So now we can talk about this stuff in our churches. We can talk about this stuff in our schools and in our families and in our organizations. We can talk about these things that are really important and big issues in our culture that have been taboo to talk about because we have a then what.
Yes.
We haven't had that in the past. So I can't talk about this because I don't know what to do with it once it's out there. And
Mm-hmm.
now we have an answer for that.
Yeah, it makes me think of there's an Equal Rights Institute article, and I think the title of it is something to the effect of what every church can do to prevent abortions in their congregation, or something to that effect. And one of the sections in it that really stuck out to me is talking about a gal who was in a church and had an abortion experience, I think decades before. It's been a while since I've read the article, so I don't remember the exact details. But what she said was, I think she finally heard something about it from the pulpit. And what she said to the pastor afterwards was like, I have been going to church for however many years, and I have not once heard anything about this. And she was suffering in silence because of it. And that's a thing that I can't tell you how many times I've heard this, but women falsely thinking that they can't be forgiven, or that they won't be forgiven, or that the church is going to turn on them because they've never heard otherwise. And in the trauma of that terrible past experience, it is easy to remain in that state and never to say anything. And that happens constantly in churches. And that's terrible. Like, first of all, yes, there sadly are some churches who wouldn't respond well, and certainly that needs to change. But even for churches that would react with compassion, as they should, and it's like that's the way it's supposed to be. We're not here to shame, we're here to love. Even when churches would do that, if people don't know that that is how the church would act because they never hear it from the pulpit, or because the church isn't connected with any local resources, or because the church doesn't know what to do in that situation, that's a problem. It's not like you have to build this from the ground up. If a pregnancy resource center wants to change to a trauma center, according with this model, it's not like they have to reinvent the wheel. They just talk to you and you help them make that happen with as little bit of with as little pain as possible. You're going to make this as simple of a transition as you can possibly be. And even if they can't onboard all of the changes themselves, they can at least be networked with you so that you can pick up the slack for anything that they don't yet have the facilities for. And it's the same thing with churches. They don't need to reinvent the wheel. They just need to know what already exists and get tapped into it so that they can offer these services. And just hearing from the pulpit twice a year and having some stuff out in the lobby can make a massive difference in people's lives, to let people know you can heal from this. Or if someone is in an unwanted pregnancy, we will help you with this.
Right. Yeah, then what? I lost my train of thought. But anyway, good comments.
Thank you. Yeah, the then what makes me think of an expression I once heard where people are never given a vocation of no without a higher vocation of yes. And it's not enough to tell people not to do something. You have to have here's what's going to be better to do instead. Because otherwise, they're just left sitting there saying, well, okay, you say no, but now what? I'm still in XYZ situation. I can't just know that something is wrong and not have another alternative, because then it just feels like you're only here to wag your finger at me, and you have no interest in actually helping me. You need to have the follow through, or else it's frankly not surprising that people wouldn't want to do what we advise them to do, because we don't have any better alternatives.
Right.
So yeah, it's critical for people to be aware that not only do women deserve better than abortion, but we have that better available. We have these better options available, and we have the ability to facilitate that better. And we're going to walk with her in that better. We're going to come around her with love and compassion, help her through that situation. And that comes back to marketing. If people don't know that you have that service, how are they going to come to you for help?
Good point.
I remember one phrase that stuck out to me in the book was TOMA, so top of mind awareness. You want to expand on that a little bit, because that really struck me as kind of a linchpin thing, and I'd like you to expand on it some.
TOMA, T-O-M-A, an acronym, is a marketing term for top of mind awareness. Top of mind awareness is the first thing that pops into your mind when I say something. So if I say gas station, first gas station pops in your mind. Grocery store, wherever you shop normally. If I say fast food burgers, something pops in your mind. McDonald's or Carl's Jr. or whatever. There's something
Yeah.
that pops into your mind. And what we try to do with trauma centers that make this transition from pregnancy centers to trauma centers is to help them understand TOMA, top of mind awareness, because unfortunately, and I got this straight from one of our staff, she had gone through an abortion, and then she was pregnant again, and went to the local pregnancy center, and they walked her through it, and she kept the child, and now she's got I think a 7-year-old daughter. But I asked her about her experience with the local pregnancy center in a community about 50,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
And she said everybody in town knew that the local pregnancy center, and I won't tell you where it was or the name of it, but the local pregnancy center is where you go to get talked out of an abortion.
Yeah, that's not a helpful perception for people in the community to have.
And the smaller your community, the more likely that that's the perception that you have, which
Yeah.
is an absolute marketing nightmare.
Yes.
You want to be there to help young women and young families go through the trauma of an unwanted pregnancy. You want to help them know their options and help them through that transition and hopefully save a child. But if you are known as your TOMA, your top of mind awareness, what you're known for is the place to go to get talked out of an abortion,
Mm-hmm.
you're fighting a losing battle.
Yeah.
So what our goal is to help the local trauma centers, these pregnancy centers that make this transition, is to create TOMA, top of mind awareness, within their communities that they are the place to go to for any sexually related trauma,
Mm-hmm.
including unwanted pregnancy. And if they
Mm-hmm.
have a reputation, if they have the perception in the community that they will walk you through sexual abuse, miscarriage, past abortion, unwanted pregnancies, STDs, they'll walk you through these things, and you're not singling pregnancy. The thing is, when we are a single focus unwanted pregnancy, and you're dealing with that, when you have a conversation with anyone around pregnancy, your conversation is going to land on abortion.
Yeah.
I don't care where you are, what you're doing. If you work at a local pregnancy center and you say, I work at the local pregnancy center, here's what we do, your conversation will land on abortion.
Mm-hmm.
When those conversations land on abortion, 10% of people will love you, 10% of people will hate you, and 80% of the people you talk to, the conversation is over because they don't know what to do with it. But when you, at a pregnancy center, now a trauma center, change the narrative, now we're dealing with sexually related trauma, everyone you talk to either has or someone close to them has an experience regarding sexually related trauma. And it changes the narrative. It doesn't go to end of conversation, or we hate you, or we love you, can we donate to you? It goes, oh, what you're talking about, sexual abuse or miscarriage. My sister just had one, or my aunt was sexually abused, or whatever. Or you move from either an apathetic or adversarial conversation to one where whoever you're talking to is now engaged in what you're doing, and you're looked at as being a noble cause and a noble organization, rather than the place you go to get talked out of an abortion. So TOMA, top of mind awareness, is helping these trauma centers create within their community where people think of anything regarding sexual abuse, any kind of sexual related trauma, miscarriage or whatever, that they are the place to go to. Like when you think of fast food fast food hamburgers, McDonald's comes to mind. Well, now the local pregnancy center comes to mind. Now the local trauma center comes to mind as
Yeah.
where to deal with these traumas. And so when a woman is having a personal experience or talking with someone who has, or coworker, neighbor, friend, family member, they
Yep.
can start referring you to, or referring your organization to those who need your services.
Yeah. Well, and I think it is also something that helps you kind of justify your mission to people who are maybe burnt out. Like they don't, there are people who have seen how long abortion has been around and they don't have hope that it's going to change. Now, I think that perspective is wrong. I think that there is always hope, and I also think that there's a lot of obvious reasons right now for hope. The Dobbs v. Jackson case is an interesting example of, hey, that might actually work, or at least be a step in the right direction. But even so, there are a lot of people who are burnt out on that, and that's understandable. This has been around for a while. It's awful that this is around for a while. Certainly, when slavery was the human rights issue that we were fighting in our country, there would have been people who were part of the abolitionist movement and just got burnt out and tired of hearing about it, not because they stopped caring or because they stopped believing in the importance of it, but because it felt like they weren't making any progress. So sometimes in order to help get people re-engaged, you sort of need to show them that there's good that you're doing. And by expanding things in this way, it's like, listen, these are all of the services that we're offering here. And all of these are something that you probably care about, or at least you should care about. And so you have a lot more people who might be like, well, okay, I might actually want to support that,
Yep.
whether that means donation or just knowing that it's available, so that, as you say, if you have that instance where you're talking to a coworker and you don't ever think it's going to come up and then it does, you're like, oh, okay, didn't expect this day to go in that direction, but I actually know of a group that deals with your particular situation. And of course, a lot of people are dealing with multiple ones of these. And so if they're going in there to deal with one of them, and then, as you say, it kind of comes out where where you're talking about, like, early on in this process, how many people you were talking to about recovering from past abortions, but also sexual abuse would come up a lot. They can be dealing with both of those traumas, which is going to help them be so much healthier overall. And also, frankly, it's easier to deal with one trauma if you're also dealing with another one that's related to it, because if you're just trying to treat one and putting the other to the side, it doesn't work as well, because this one is still holding this one back.
Yep. And I believe abortion will go away.
Yes.
Just like slavery was wrong, it went away. Now, from being legal anyway,
Yeah.
abortion will go away, but unwanted pregnancies will never go away.
Right.
And that's really what we're dealing with. We're not dealing with abortion. Abortion is looked at as a remedy when we should be looking at the problem of unwanted pregnancy is going to continue. It will always be there, always has been there.
Yeah.
And so abortion as an option is no longer there. All the more need for trauma centers to be there to help pick up the pieces and help these young women, these young families, these couples, whatever, make this transition to deal with the trauma.
Yep.
So even if abortion goes away, it doesn't. It's not going to take away the need for being a center that deals with the trauma.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, all of these are still going to be things that are dealt with, because, just like how human trafficking still happens, even though slavery is illegal, there will also still be people who will get illegal abortions. I mean, there were before Roe v. Wade, there will be after. It'll be a dramatically reduced number. All of the evidence points to the abortion numbers will just plummet when it becomes illegal, but it will still happen. That'll still be a trauma to be dealt with. STDs, still going to have to deal with that. Sexual assault, we're still going to be dealing with that trauma. Miscarriages, still dealing with that trauma. And as you say, unwanted pregnancies, we're still going to be dealing with that. And so by setting these things up now, we're basically future proofing to be able to have an uninterrupted care being provided to the people who need it. And that's huge because, you know, my background in study is military history. And so many times after a war or during the course of the war, there wasn't a setup in place to be helping returning veterans. And then they had to scramble to put something together when all of a sudden the need was there. And, you know, any VA program is going to have problems, period, just because it's an institution by human hands. There are going to be faults. But all the more so if you're having to scramble to put this together at the last moment and you don't have a clear vision of where you're going with it. It's better to have it before you need it. You know, having a program like that is sort of like having a parachute. You hope you won't need it, but you don't want to not have it when you do. And so having these programs set up now means that even, and I agree with you, abortion will one day become illegal. Even when that happens, we're still going to need all of this. And so having the framework and even just the societal acceptance of it as a concept means that it won't be a speed bump that we're all of a sudden having to scramble to put something together hurriedly. It's like, no, not only is it already here, but it's been here for a few decades, and we've worked out a lot of kinks, and we've really optimized the programs to be as good as they can be. They're in all the major cities. That's really the goal, is we want to have this infrastructure built up and ready to go, because it will serve people now and it'll serve people in the future.
Well, just think about abortion. How many millions of women had an abortion because it was legal, and
Yeah.
so because it was legal, they equate that with moral.
Yep.
It's okay, and now all of a sudden, abortion is illegal, and they're now questioning the morality.
Mm-hmm.
If it was okay, why did they make it illegal? What have I done? And so
Yeah.
this discourse that we're having around abortion is causing a lot of women to question their decision, their choice, and face some of the issues that they have been haunting them for for many years.
Yeah.
And so I think making abortion illegal is really going to put the gas pedal to the need for having abortion recovery programs that are effective within communities.
Yes. Yeah. My boss had Esther Ripplinger, and she's been very public about this. So like me disclosing this is not anything that's outside the norm. This has been in emails. This has been talked about in other podcasts that we've had. But she had an abortion when she was younger, and it took a long time for her to get connected with a healing program, even when she was working in the pro-life movement, even after she'd gone through a period of changing her mind about abortion, becoming part of the pro-life movement. It still took her years to get connected with the program. And during that whole time, there was this unaddressed trauma. And a big thing that we're trying to do in human life right now is make more people aware of the great programs out there to help people deal with abortion-related trauma, like, SRT Services, obviously with Abanon, but also with Save One, Rachel's Vineyard, all these other groups that are out there that have been pioneering these programs. We want people to be aware that this is there, because we don't want someone to have to wait to address a trauma. We don't want someone to be suffering with this for years before they finally find a group, if they find a group that is going to help them address this trauma. We instead want to just get them right to it and get them started on the healing journey as soon as they can. And with unwanted pregnancies, we don't want women to be scrambling around trying to be like, oh man, what am I going to do with this? We want it to be so pervasive in society that people know where they can get help, that it's just like, oh, everybody in town knows about that place. People dealing with sexual assault, people dealing with STDs, we want them to know right where they can go for help. People dealing with miscarriages. So many people in our society deal with miscarriages, multiple miscarriages. We want people to know right where they can go for help when they need it and not have to wait around.
And that goes back to TOMA. When Planned Parenthood is no longer there, and a young woman finds herself possibly pregnant and she doesn't want to be pregnant, that's where it's all the more reason for that local trauma center to be top of mind awareness, TOMA, in that community. This Planned Parenthood is no longer an option. Where does this young gal go? It's through marketing that you establish that that's the place to go to deal with this trauma, and we'll walk you through it.
Yeah,
Because they can't go to Planned Parenthood anymore. It's illegal. All the more
yeah.
reason to have this trauma healing services in place.
And it's also, frankly, it kind of in line with the marketing thing and just reframing the narrative is a lot of people unjustly accuse us of not having that next step in place. Not, you don't have a plan for when abortion is made illegal. Actually, we do. And it's a pretty good one. Why don't you take a look at it? Take some of our literature. It was actually, I just read an article today that really, really made me chuckle. There was I don't remember the guy's name or even what state he was in, but there was, I'll post the article in the description. But there was a guy who proposed what he thought of as like a gotcha bill that he introduced in his state's legislature to be like, well, why don't we make it so that men have to pay child support for the fetus and whatnot. Let's just start it off that he already has an obligation there, or something to that effect. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it had to do something with mandatory prenatal care. And the hilarious response to that is that this guy's pretty pro-choice in his leanings, and he expected this to be as a gotcha moment against the pro-lifers, but the opposite of what he wanted happened, because the pro-life movement immediately just swamped it with their support. They were just like, yes, I will start doing that in my church. Like, we will be promoting this in my church. We're going to get behind the bill. So happy you have proposed this. And just this big rallying cry of being like, absolutely, we've been wanting this for years. And the abortion lobby immediately tried to recast that whole thing as somehow being discriminatory towards women. Like, I don't know how they attempt to justify that by saying, yes, making it so that the man is financially responsible, that's somehow against women. Making him bear some of the responsibility, which you've always said it's unfair that he's not bearing the responsibility in any way, shape, or form. So making it at least financially mandatory, and somehow that's against women. That's completely against their own narrative. And so he ended up withdrawing the bill. Surprise, surprise. And I kind of tried to play it off as like a social experiment or something, but it's just like, oh, come on. But the more things like that happen, the more the narrative that that women need abortion, that narrative collapses when faced with hypocrisy like that. And it also collapses, many of the false accusations that are leveled against us. It collapses in the face of things like, oh, you don't care about people after they're born, or you don't care about helping women after they've had the baby or chosen to have the baby and whatnot. And it's like, well, but what about this? Like, we have a trauma center. Look at all the stuff that's happening to help women at this trauma center, helping them with abuse and sexual assault, helping them with miscarriage, helping them with STDs, helping them with unwanted pregnancies, helping them with past abortions. Like, that flies in the face of the narrative. That helps people be more receptive to working with us instead of against us. Okay, well, this has been an incredible insight, and I'm really excited to be able to put this out there for people to watch and kind of get a feel for what SRT looks like. But obviously, some people are going to have more questions. They're going to want to reach out to you and get in contact and see more about the program, or maybe they want to get the book or and read through it that way or learn more about it that way. So what would be the best way to get in touch with you if someone was like, yes, I want to start this program right now, or hey, I'd like some more information on that? How would they get in touch with you?
Well, our website is srtservices.org. Very simple, srtservices.org. You can read a lot about all of our programs. Resource page, you can buy the book if you want a copy of the book. And to get in touch with me directly is Perry, Perry, at srtservices.org. And so that's my email address. You can put that in your notes when you do this, when you publish this.
I will.
So I don't mind my email address being out there. But there's also ways to contact us through our website as well. If you want more
Excellent.
information on anything, there's tabs in there you can click on and just send a message to our organization, and they'll get to me if they're intended for me.
Excellent. Well, Perry, thank you so much for joining us for this conversation. I really like this organization. I really like what you're doing, and I really like the way that you're approaching things. I think that you and your folks just have such a heart of love for people who are suffering, and such a desire to help them work through their traumas, work through their struggles, whatever those might be, and wherever they've been up to this point. And I think that that's just, that's what the pro-life movement is meant to be. So it's been a privilege to have you on. I'm real glad to be able to share your message with other people and hopefully get more people in touch with you so that they can start improving the work that they're doing and make more resources available to the people in need in their communities.
Well, thank you, Michael. And actually, if your viewers are looking for an organization to get plugged into, volunteering, and you want to be facilitators, we have, we are all over the world. Our groups reach people all over the world, and we are constantly needing more facilitators. We got 60 or 70 right now, but we need more. So
okay,
we can use the help. But find our website. You'll learn a lot more, and you'll also find ways to get in touch with our organization should you like to.
Okay. And is there like a volunteer form on the website that they should go to if they are interested in volunteering, or should they just email you and start that way?
There's a place to go in. It's an email of join the mission. Anyway, the website, just go there, and it's very intuitive on where to go, figure it out, depending on what your needs are.
Excellent.
What you're looking for.
And of course, if anybody needs help dealing with any of these traumas, I've been to the website. It is very nicely laid out, but I also will put the links to these individual sections in the description as well. If you are dealing with these traumas, please do not hesitate to reach out to SRT Services. They're there to help you. They're very professional. They're very gifted, and their heart is to help you, to love you, and to help you heal from whatever it is that you're struggling with in these areas, whatever traumas you have suffered. They want to help put you on the path of healing and walk with you on that journey. So I encourage you to reach out if you or anyone you know is in that situation.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I've got a great team. We've got, I think, 9 people on staff. Great team that they'll be taken care of.
All right. Well, again, thank you very much, Perry, and thank you as well to kind of your extended network and the different PRCs that have signed on with you to start making that change too, because there's even some local help for people wherever that's been adopted. So it's been a real privilege to have you, and I look forward to hopefully having you on in the future.
Sounds good. I've enjoyed this.
All right. Have a great evening.